I wanted to revisit the election-related news that broke out of Colorado when we were live on air last night. For those who missed it, the state's Supreme Court ruled that former President Donald Trump will be banned from Colorado's presidential primary ballot because he engaged in an insurrection. Now, the news was so shocking and unexpected that I didn't really know how to immediately react to it. But something didn't feel right, and I couldn't really articulate why in that moment. So today, after thinking it through, I wanted to provide some updates on both the story and what I think about it. First, here are some more details on the matter.
Trump's candidacy was challenged by invoking the 14th Amendment's disqualification clause. It states that anyone engaging in insurrection cannot hold public office. That, of course, refers to his actions on and before January 6th.
So I want to be clear about something because I see a lot of people on the right arguing that the justices in Colorado Supreme Court were citing what happened specifically with the riots on January 6th to make their argument of disqualifying Donald Trump from the state's ballot. But they're focusing on the broader picture, which involved the intricate plan of installing fake electors. More on that in just a moment. Now, Colorado's justices cited Section 3 of the Civil War era 14th Amendment, which cites that no person shall hold any office, civil or military, under the United States who, having previously taken an oath as an officer of the United States to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. In their 4-3 decision, Colorado Supreme Court argued that the sum of these parts is this: President Trump is disqualified from holding the office of president. We do not reach these conclusions lightly. We are mindful of the magnitude and weight of the questions now before us. We are likewise mindful of our solemn duty to apply the law without fear or favor and without being swayed by public reaction to the decisions that the law mandates we reach. In other words, they're saying, look, we can't really consider the reaction of Trump supporters when we make this decision. We need to look at the facts and come up with the correct conclusion based on those facts. Now, NBC News reported that even if someone is found to be ineligible to serve, the amendment says Congress can overturn that decision with a 2/3 majority. That's very unlikely to happen. But what about the merit of the court's argument? Well, legal experts argue that the wording in Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is vague, as is the case with most things in our Constitution, and allows for different interpretations of whether Trump's participation in the fake elector scheme would disqualify him from the ballot. This textual vagueness is why the trial judge kept Trump on the 2024 ballot, but the high court disagreed, and this was the linchpin of their decision to disqualify Trump. At question is whether the 14th Amendment specifically applies to the president. Now, believe it or not, many legal experts argue that it doesn't, including Ty Cobb, who used to be one of Trump's White House lawyers, but is currently a pretty fierce critic of the former president.
Can we just dig into the law here just a little bit? Because when you read into Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, the language, which is what the Supreme Court, if they take this up, is going to assess, quote, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States. That part doesn't say president, and here's what Ty Cobb, former White House lawyer under Trump and now has been very critical of Trump, here's what he said about this, listen.
And to the extent that the president or the vice president are included as an officer or included within the admonitions of the Constitution, they are typically highlighted, like in the impeachment clause, which specifically says president, vice president. So I think this case will be handled quickly. I think it could be 9-0 in the Supreme Court for Trump.
Now, obviously, 4 out of the 7 Colorado justices disagreed with Cobb's interpretation. They write, it seems most likely that the presidency is not specifically included because it is so evidently an office, the court said, adding that a conclusion that the presidency is something other than an office under the United States is fundamentally at odds with the idea that all government officials, including the president, serve we the people. Now, Trump's legal team is certainly going to appeal the ruling to the Supreme Court, and the Colorado justices put their ruling on hold pending SCOTUS's decision. Keep in mind that Trump can still win the election even if he's disqualified in Colorado. Now, sure, he lost the Centennial State in 2020, allowing Biden to snatch Colorado's 9 electoral votes. But Trump also lost Colorado back in 2016 and went on to win the general election against Hillary Clinton. And look, I'm not a constitutional law expert and can't really credibly weigh in on the legal questions that arise from this case. I can only say that logically speaking, the decision seems to make sense. Look, Trump did attempt to install fake electors after losing the 2020 presidential election, including in states like New Mexico, where he had no pending litigation alleging voter fraud. His lawyer, Kenneth Chesebro, who was one of the architects of the fake elector scheme, stupidly circulated memos where he clearly referred to the electors as fake or fraudulent, basically telling on himself. And many of Trump's co-conspirators, including Chesebro, have taken plea deals in Georgia. Now, Trump and his team wanted to go against the will of the American voters who were ready for a new leader, albeit one that's currently deeply unpopular. But I think it's worth separating the legal question, which might definitely have merit, from the political one. Now, if you have trouble with distinctions, just stop watching now because you're inevitably going to mistake my analysis as support for Trump when it's not. But the truth is, I honestly don't feel great about how Colorado's ruling could impact the country. As the New York Times' Maggie Haberman explains, if this unprecedented decision is upheld by the United States Supreme Court, the consequences would be extraordinarily grim for Trump at first. But I'm worried about the precedent it would set and how it would affect elections in the future.
I don't think they want the Supreme Court to uphold the decision, right? And that is obviously within the realm of the possible, although they don't think that that's the likeliest scenario, because if that happens, I mean, to Ellie's point, you are going to see people in other states trying this anyway. And if the Supreme Court does that, he'll get kicked off the ballot almost everywhere.
Now, I have no doubt that most of Trump's detractors think the possibility of SCOTUS ruling against him would be a fantastic development for 2024's Trump-Biden rematch. After all, it would come as Biden insists on running for re-election despite getting demolished in every poll. But there are political ramifications that come along with Colorado's decision, and those consequences could be further compounded if SCOTUS upholds the ruling. For one, Trump is really good at taking what would typically sink one's political career and using it to his electoral advantage. After all, we're talking about a guy who has capitalized on his mugshot to make Trump campaign merch that sells out, and it sells out quickly. He successfully built a victimhood narrative around the very legal issues he brought onto himself, including 4 separate indictments. He claims that all allegations and all indictments he's facing are part of an anti-democratic conspiracy against him, even despite mounting evidence proving otherwise. Trump has repeatedly collapsed all those cases into what he has called a witch hunt, one aimed at stopping his candidacy as opposed to holding him accountable. He and his allies are already folding the Colorado ruling into that same narrative. Trump has perfected a playbook of victimhood, raising campaign funds off each indictment and encouraging Republican officials to defend him. Now, he's already put out campaign emails, fundraising off of Colorado's decision. The ruling by Colorado's justices is no exception. Like, he's making money off of it as we speak.
What are you hearing from Trump insiders about the reaction to the ruling tonight?
They generally see it, Caitlin, as a gift. I mean, Trump is not happy about any of these cases, particularly cases that tie him to a charge of insurrection, but they see the way that they anticipate this will play out. They feel pretty good about their chances that it will get overturned, and either way, they see this as something that they can use to argue that he is being victimized. It's something that's easy for voters to understand, Caitlin, which is, effort to throw someone off the ballot. Some of these legal cases, the criminal cases that he's facing, are more complicated. So again, none of this in the aggregate is the kind of news that most people would like, but somehow every time Donald Trump gets a piece of legal news that in normal times would be problematic, it has had a rallying effect on his supporters.
Now, based on the average of polls and the massive lead that Trump has on every Republican challenger in the GOP primary, it was already pretty likely that he was going to win the party's nomination. But the news out of Colorado might just seal the deal. Officials with Trump's rival GOP campaigns privately feared that the decision would be seen as an overreach by Democrats, one that could bolster his current lead among Republicans in the Iowa caucuses on January 15th and in the primaries immediately after. But look, there are other issues, more important issues that come along with perceptions of overreach. We're already dealing with a massive problem in the country where Americans have completely lost faith in our institutions and system of government. Some, like Tim Pool, for example, are just itching for a civil war as a result. We're in dangerous territory, and I'm not really sure that the elites are fully aware of it. This isn't going to make things any better, since Trump supporters are going to feel disenfranchised by what they perceive as a politically motivated effort to kneecap Trump. I'm not the only one worried about this. Here's Trump's former lawyer and critic, Ty Cobb, once again.
This vindicates his insistence that this is a political conspiracy to interfere with the election, and that that he's the target, and people shouldn't tolerate that in America. It's doodah, but that's the way he tries to sell this.
So then there's the inevitable, and we know it's inevitable, tit for tat that will make our already frustrating electoral process even more unbearable and dysfunctional. For the most part, states are free to conduct elections how they choose, with state officials and legislatures setting the rules. If the Supreme Court upholds Colorado's decision, it could open the floodgates and allow for red states to retaliate in ways that I'm sure Democrats would not be fond of. In fact, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has already raised the possibility of taking Biden off the ballot in the state of Texas.
Seeing what happened in Colorado tonight, Laura, makes me think, except we believe in democracy in Texas, maybe we should take Joe Biden off the ballot in Texas for allowing 8 million people to cross the border since he's been president, disrupting our state far more than anything anyone else has done in recent history.
I want you to also consider the fact that Trump hasn't been convicted of anything yet. He hasn't been convicted in the election interference case in Georgia or the federal case brought forth by the special counsel Jack Smith. Similarly, Biden has been accused, without any evidence at all, that he has profited off of the foreign business deals that his son Hunter engaged in. Wouldn't Republicans be able to encourage activist judges in various red states to take Biden off the ballot? I'm just saying, Republicans love to play tit for tat because they have no problem going low, real low, and they do hit hard. And look, I don't know if Patrick would even have the legal standing to do what he just floated in the video we watched, but I have no doubt that red states would try all sorts of stunts. And honestly, guys, I'm tired of all of it. I'm so tired of all of it. I'm tired of the political games. I'm tired of the partisan garbage by two overwhelmingly horrible parties who care less about representing the best interests of Americans and more about their own political power and careers. As much as I personally dislike Trump, it does feel as though Democrats are putting their thumb on the scale here. Ryan Grimm was able to articulate what I was having trouble finding words for when the story broke yesterday. Let's watch.
Liberals just keep looking for a manager. Like they want somebody that they can call that's gonna fix this situation.
That's so good.
Like in 2016, after he got elected, at first it was the faithless electors. They were gonna find these members of the Electoral College who they could persuade to just change their votes, and because of Russia or because of whatever else, and they would elect Hillary Clinton that way. Afterwards there was, Bob Mueller was the manager that they were gonna call in, and then eventually this like Elliot Ness wannabe comes in with his big case that doesn't even bring insurrection. Right. Like bring insurrection, lock the guy up, and then disqualify him. Like that's your option, or you beat him at the ballot box. Like I think this middle ground where they're kind of letting him hang out for 4 years, roaming the streets of Coral Gables or Palm Beach or wherever he is. And then with him 10 points up in the polls, saying they're going to disqualify him, I think is kind of ugly.
I totally agree with what Grim said there. Beating Trump should be a layup. It's an indictment on the Democratic Party that they seem to have trouble doing so. I also feel that Colorado Supreme Court is putting the cart before the horse because, again, Trump hasn't even been convicted in the election interference cases yet, and he has not been charged with insurrection at all. The very argument that the Colorado Supreme Court is using to boot him from the primary ballot. I think a far better path forward for Democrats would be the allowance of a robust primary to ensure that Democrats have a competitive nominee to duke it out against Donald Trump in the general. Since 2016, the main message we've heard from Democrats is vote for us because the other guy is horrible, or he's tied up in legal problems, he's bad, real bad, or we suck, but the other guy sucks more, vote for us. If Trump is awful, and I believe he is, Democrats should be able to beat him easily instead of resorting to legal stunts. What's happening now is only going to rip the country apart further at a time when I genuinely feel we need to heal and rebuild trust in our institutions. Something tells me we're not headed in that direction and we're headed for more chaos. Now, in response to all of this, the Republican Party in the state of Colorado is now considering switching their primary election to a caucus system, which would essentially ensure that Trump supporters in the state would be able to vote for him in the GOP primary. That would have all sorts of obstacles in the way of accomplishing what they're trying to accomplish. We'll see how that plays out. But everything really hinges on how the United States Supreme Court rules on this matter. And to be quite frank, I do expect them to rule in Trump's favor. But who knows? You never know what to expect. I guess we're gonna have to wait and see. But again, I am worried about the negative ramifications of this, even though I do believe that Donald Trump has engaged in election interference and attempted to overturn the results of 2020. Anyway, let me know what you all think. I'm sure everyone hates me for saying what I just said. But again, it's not because I'm supportive of Trump. It's more because I think it would be a better path to just defeat him. The dude's like 77 years old. This is his last chance. He's not gonna run again after this. So let's just defeat him with the best possible candidate. Instead, I think resorting to these legal maneuvers is not gonna bode well for the future of the country.
Thanks for watching. If you become a member, you get to watch all this ad-free, except for, of course, this ad. Still, hit the join button below.